Well, something weird happened with my file management system where things were only partially deleted, so I had to reformat. But that's fine. I'm looking at sort of the cleanup of my elsewhere scenario. Normally I do this, I guess, after the scenario, but I wanted to get the video out and whatever. But there's a couple of things I need to know. I need to know the degree of victory of the battle. And regardless of the fact that this is the second edition, essentially, of the game. I mean, they had enough time to put this in. I'm assuming they used the living rules from the second edition. It actually doesn't tell you how to score partial hits on fighters. Yeah, I'm kind of like, well, okay. I'm assuming the fighters are actually destroyed. They're not treated as a ship that can be repaired or anything like that. But okay. So, I keep going. I expect to see more on that, or something on that, in the repairs rules for fighters. And it kind of doesn't say it there either. Again, you know, in both cases, I can come up with a fix, and I will, but I find it a little odd that it hasn't come up as an issue. You know, I can understand maybe there's a lot here and people might not have been able to play through the campaign, although you'd think they'd play through a couple of scenarios of it and come up with this question during the playtesting. But you also would think that during normal play these questions would have arisen, and by the second edition they would have cleared these things up in the modern era. I understand more in the Avalon Hill era where people are afraid, you know, to ask questions, and the print runs are so large, but, you know, even the second edition or whatever still has issues that float through. But here, this seems a little odd, not to simply state, look, destroyed fighters, the fighters are treated as individual ships, and if you destroy part of a fighter squadron, you score a proportional amount of the damage to it. How to fill out your fighter squadrons, I don't know, honestly. You know, I mean, in the campaign system, and apparently also the victory point system, they're treated as kind of a unified thing. So, you know, in one sense, this is the only squadron that was destroyed. I'm certainly, since I couldn't find any rules on whether or not, you know, you're allowed to consolidate your damaged, your destroyed, your non-destroyed fighters. God, those fucking people at the thing behind me that really annoy me. Oh, great, they're Bernie supporters. Either that or somebody is using icy hot on their dick. I don't know. But yeah, obviously they're not going to answer the specific question about consolidation if they don't even deal with the very easy question of how do you score damaged, destroyed fighters in a squadron, and, you know, how do you deal with partially destroyed fighters in a squadron as well for the victory, for the moving the campaign thing. Now, this is not just a campaign thing. Victory in scenarios is determined by this. And they have this whole, this is why I can't believe this didn't make it through, this part didn't get caught in playtesting. There's this whole concept of, like, and yeah, I know I'm babbling about this crap. This is so usual for me, isn't it? There's this whole concept about scoring a series of battles. You know, basically you have a lifetime score in this game, which seems a little weird because it always just grows. It's not like, I don't know, the area ratings, for example, you lost points for losses. It was more like a chess ranking type thing where, yeah, anytime you're beaten, you kind of lose something. Might not be much, you know. It might be 0 because you're essentially unexpected to be able to win against certain players, but whatever. In this case, you know, it's just a pure positive ranking. Each time you play, you get more experience points in the game, essentially. And it doesn't mean anything at all. You know, it's not like there's some system to deal with it. It's just your scoring in the game. The more you play it, the higher your rating is in it, whatever. And it's not tracked anywhere as far as I know, so it doesn't really matter. But you'd think if they put those rules in and worried about all that crap and created a section for tracking, you know, how well you have done over the course of games, this question would have arisen of, well, how do you treat fighters in the case of losses? And I mean, the answer is obvious, but in the sense that, yeah, you should prorate them. But it doesn't prorate easily, right? 44 divided by 3 does not round evenly. Shit, I'm totally wrong. Destroyed fighters in a squadron are restored. Just for free. Boom. You lose all the fighters? Nah. Somehow, you know, the infrastructure, the cheap production of fighters, whatever, goes away if you manage to kill all 3 fighters in a single squadron. Somehow that disappears in the back end. But if it doesn't, there's like this free buildup of fighters. Wow. Well, that makes fighters really potent, doesn't it? It's actually kind of similar to the SFB rules, but they don't charge you terribly for fighters. Campaigns that have fighters in them might have a reduced cost for producing fighters, or they may just restore them for free no matter what, however they're deployed. But with this game, the way they're handled, it doesn't really talk about that. But this doesn't even make sense, you know. It's like, yep. As long as one fighter, I guess maybe it's the cost of training pilots, as long as you have one fighter from the thing. But if that was the case, you would pull somebody out of the squadron to become your cadre and, you know, then have 2 1-point squadrons. I gotta rebuild my sheet. I've essentially got 3 fully functioning, 3 damaged fighter groups that if I can pull them back behind the lines, they'll just get restored. The only reason I looked for this was because I couldn't find out how bases were repaired where I expected it over here. You know, why did I expect it here? Because I saw repairs are there. What the hell? But no, repairs are handled here. And, yeah, they get 1 hull point and repair all critical damage still in effect. Because I had 1 hull point against my thing. Now, what's fucked up about this, honestly, is that, so I got to think about this. I had 4 squadrons of fighters. Now I have 3, all of which I think are damaged. So I want to pull them all out, and I have to re-record that. And I guess what that means is you didn't get points for killing fighters, like partial squadrons of fighters and stuff. Anyway, the points were significant enough, especially with that, but even without that, that the Terrans won the battle. So we're going to be back up at Falcon's Maze, which we didn't actually fight. And it looks like it's got some asteroids or something in it. Just like 4 asteroid hexes in the middle of the battlefield. Doesn't look too impressive, to tell you the truth. You can go around them pretty easily if you don't want to deal with them. And that'll put us, I guess, down to Cloud 9. Sorry about all the time on this. It's just, I absolutely was not expecting this to be the answer. So I guess the answer is actually as they're written, which is, yeah, if you don't destroy the entire fighter squadron, it's like a ship. It's treated like a ship that's not destroyed. Wow. Next battle down here at Cloud 9 in the Maelstrom sector. I got 2 carriers with 8 fighters. I'm facing 2 battleships, a dreadnought, a battle cruiser, and a destroyer. I don't know. All those heavy ships, they're not all that good against fighters, actually. Let's take a look at some of these. The battle cruisers are good. They have missiles. The dreadnought is armed with those big fusion cannons, which don't work against them. And I would guess the battleship is as well. We haven't seen a battleship yet. Yep, the battleship is as well. So we're looking at a battle cruiser and a destroyer to deal with the fighters. The other things are going to wipe the shit out of those carriers. Now, point-wise, this is a huge advantage for the Talon. And there's some desire to just fall back and say, screw it. You know, they won't be able to take the base, and then I'll be back up there. But I think I can do a lot of damage with those two carriers and their fighter complement. After having seen what I did and realizing, there's a lot of disruptors on those ships, so they do have some capacity to blow the shit out of fighters. But they're kind of missing some of their heaviest weapons. And the carriers, see, the carriers are weird. They're rated at a 70-point value. I don't know if they're worth that. They're basically two phasers. But their capacity to lend points to the fighters is kind of important for reloading, for recycling the weapons more than anything else. I don't think the carriers are going to last long, though. That's kind of the problem. So I'm debating whether or not I want to fight this one. Now, while the whiny fucking music is going from back there, a lot better when it was Johnny Cash or Cream or something. It's a cover band, but this is really poorly done. I don't think I'd mind the song if it was better done. We've got a random terrain here, and it took me a while to find this fucking table that it's generated from. And let's see, I'm on the wrong page for that. I'm on the terrain generation for scenarios page, which is not right, so I have to keep this here. I thought this was on the back of a chart. It's not. It's hidden somewhere in the books. So somewhere here, they tell me, Paradise. Use the chart, and we get one terrain pattern. We never get multiple terrain patterns off this, even though the random scenario generator can create that. And we need two different types of dice. Well, we'll call this the red die first. And there's not a lot of, not a whole lot of variation, it looks to me, in there. So we get an asteroid field and some nebulas placed somewhere at the Talon player's decision. This is basically the pattern. I think it can be rotated, whatever. I'm not quite sure what I want to do. I've set up all the ships with all their plotting. They're forced, this is kind of cool to me, they're forced to have an entry value. Problem with that is you can't enter with, you know, a sort of standard deployment strategy, or a deployment strategy based on the situation, the enemy, whatever. Instead, you're entering with whatever the defaults are, which means, you know, I don't know, these are all going speed 3, so that's not too bad. But, and fighters are always going to be going faster than their carriers and the other ships in the thing. I don't think it's a terrible thing. I think for some kind of doctrinal type thing, it makes sense. The problem is there's no doctrine for how you set up your ships, you know. So you do get to choose that in terms of positioning. The speeds kind of determine that. You don't want your fighters ramming into your ships or anything along those lines. This is about as far as I can go until the damn music cuts out. Apparently, I understand what's going on. There's like a real band there, but they're letting people get up and sing. So like, some of the stuff they do really well, and some of it's people who just don't know, you know, how to sing. Sort of like live karaoke band, I don't know. But it's one of the big disadvantages of living with the park behind me. But, you know, the park is usually not too bad. The problem is there's a pavilion right back there. Anyway, this is going to be another big battle. Like I said, I'm going to fight it out because I think the Terrans can do some serious damage here. I don't think they can win the battle, but I think they can take out, you know, some ships that are expensive to replace. And all of this causes issues because you can't build any new ships if you don't have at least one of each ship. So like, you know, let's say I'm able to kill these two battleships. Well, then he has to rebuild a battleship. I don't know. He may have two dreadnoughts. Not that he's necessarily all that hindered by that. Um, the other thing is, no matter what, and you can accuse this to, you know, contracts and stuff, and you have to excuse me, I don't make as much sense as usual. It's impossible for me to think when there's music going, whether I like it or not, basically, or noise. That's why I can't work in an office. But all I can do is kind of power over any noises, even when my wife's up here doing dishes or something like that. I just have to power through any noises by talking and talking and talking more and more loudly and more aggressively within myself to try to blot out the noises that are invading my head. But yeah, I shouldn't be up during the daytime, I guess. That was something I learned when I was in my teens. But yeah, I had something there to say. Oh yeah, so like, let's say you don't like light cruisers and you just find they're fucking useless. Well, you're forced to keep producing a certain amount of them. Yeah, no matter what. And you also have the restrictions because of countermix to what you can actually field in any given battle, which creates kind of more mixed fleets. That's cool. I mean, all these things you can kind of do some hand-wavy explanations to deal with. And I think, so one of the things about that is that those rules kind of just don't apply if you're playing SE4X. You're allowed to build whatever the hell you like, although the deployments to the field do matter. But the... this one doesn't sound very good. The rules about fighter replacement might actually be built, the cost of damaging fighters, etc. That may all actually be part of the SE4X rule set, or to try to bring it into alignment with that. I actually thought those fighters worked kind of like fighters do in SFB Fed and Emp, which is you just recover them in that game. And I don't know, I'm tempted to look. I have not dug into the SE4X rules for this. Yeah, I don't see much here. So I think whatever you use, I think what it says here is that basically you use Space Empire's 4X except where there are exceptions, you know, that are specifically called out for Talon. So like the ships that are available to the different races and stuff. So here's our setup for the beginning of Cloud 9. I tried to throw the terrain feature, which is very much in favor of the fighters. Asteroids don't affect them at all, basically, except for firing angles. They disrupt that, I believe. Maybe not even. And the nebula also just suppresses fire in and out, but it takes down the big ship's shields. So I'm looking at the fighters trying to hide in there. Now, they do affect tracing, maybe, from the carriers. So I got to be a little careful there if that's the case. But anyway, obvious pro fighter advantage. Shove it over to the edge of the board. Set up to try to screen it. But you know, the Terran's set up as far over so that they can take advantage of it. And honestly, what they should be allowed to do is just float the map and set up exactly on the other side of it. But we're going to try to make the terrain feature a part of our battle. We need everything we can get. We're heavily outnumbered, but I believe we have some advantages just due to the weapon mix. Talon didn't really have anything they could do on this first turn. I mean, they could burn afterburners. Terrans, well, I might as well grab initiative since I have some power. And there's not much I can do with the power. Before I would have been charging up all those side slips, but these things move so fast, they got to take their side slip or not. So pretty much it's they will get the side slip if and when the carrier is around and says, hey, you can have this little extra advantage. I don't like that because really to me the side slip is a factor of the regular movement in the engines, and I don't think that the same power, the power that's used for charging the weapons, etc., reflects the fact that, oh yeah, I can get, I can be a little bit more precise in my turning is really what the side slip comes down to. I actually prefer the SFB style of side slips, which is you can do it every other move, and it works out as yeah, it should be a factor of your turn radius more than anything else. Neither one is correct as far as I'm concerned. It's why the hex grid is problematic. And then I threw some shield reinforcement that doesn't matter at all on. After a little bit of maneuvering, we're starting stage E here. Some missiles were launched. That forces the Terran player to make a choice of, hey, am I going to try to shoot down the missiles, protect my fighters, or, maybe try to launch a more impressive amount of damage early on and try to knock out some of the ships. I feel like I have to protect my fighters to some extent. Those missiles take a little while to recharge. Then again, so do the fighter capabilities. So. And this is all beginning to feel like a big mistake for the Terrans at this point. I thought the fighters did a kind of good showing last time. Yeah, that was with the support of the heavy weapons of the base. Here, I got a heavier force fighting me, and the Talon are able to handle a bunch of fighters if need be. So what happened, we actually had a bid. This is the first time I've used any defend initiative, just because since side slips aren't valuable anymore, except if you need them right away, basically. I didn't burn any off. And then you want to have your points allocated so that they match up, because if you end up getting activity points or action points or whatever at a point where available power, at a point where you don't have a move, you can't just say, yeah, I want to side slip now and slip over. You have to kind of plan this in advance, and that is harder. Having it as a capability that just sticks around for a long time, yeah, then I just put them in the bank, and that's great. Having it as I need it right now, means a certain level of planning that it doesn't work for me. That's going to make it very, very difficult for me to get side slips off unless I have, like here, the movement and action point allowances kind of aligned. The Talon actually beat that because, hey, again, points aren't worth that much. And having a lot more ECM capability or whatever it's supposed to represent allowed me to grab the initiative. Again, I'm not sure what the initiative exactly is, but ECM seems like a good argument for what's being covered in there. But yeah, I was able to fire disruptors off of 3 of my ships. That's a lot of my firepower, and take out 2 of the fighter squadrons, and no damage anywhere else. As you can see, though, the fighters failed to fire any of their weapons to good effect on the ships. We're making ground, closing in on those carriers. Those are going to be dead. This is, I think, going to be a wipeout. Now comes the painful part, which is programming your movement for the turn. I find this much, much more painful than the energy allocation forms for a couple of reasons. And I know, probably the biggest one is simply, I'm used to, or at least was used to, filling those suckers out. And I would just, that would be almost like a turn in and of itself, is I would sit down and record those. But the biggie with them is, do I want to go fast or slow? What weapons need charging and everything. And it was all very much a mechanical process, just really kind of filling out the numbers based on some big strategic decisions. Here, I have to do some real geometric thought right now, because there's not a lot of distance. There's not a lot of, okay, will I need a high energy turn? All right, I'll spend for that. It's not like just these capabilities that I know I'm going to need and that are calling out to me. Instead, I'm trying to outguess and figure out the plan of the turn at this point. Now, for me, again, planning is hard. Mechanical actions aren't necessarily so painful, so sitting down and just filling out the sheets isn't too bad. But this, it's tough, you know. It's guesswork, man. I hate guesswork. I was overselling it. Honestly, no, I don't dislike it that much. With a bunch of ships that are similar types, I was able to just kind of say, yeah, I want to go at this speed. I want to travel in formation. That'll work fine. There's no real reason. I'm not worried about wave motion guns or anything like that that's complex. So I can just charge forward, and I actually reduced my speeds to 2 across the board, giving me a little bit more power for recharges. One of the nice things about getting my that first strike in was I've got some unloaded weapons that I can expend energy on throughout the turn, which is something that the Terrans do not have. Of course, I didn't unload my missiles because I burned the one squadron that was in range of those last couple missiles, but whatever. And for the Terrans, their speeds, this is actually pretty fixed. The fighters, I could go a little faster, but the maneuverability is too important to give up. And then for the carriers themselves, I really like having that excess power. A little bit of maneuver seems good, seeing that the Talon are slowing down a little bit. It seems perfectly reasonable to me to do the same thing. So we'll push into round 2. Right, so as we start the new turn, the Talon actually burn a point to defend initiative. I didn't really think it's that important, but actually it turned out that the Terrans wanted the initiative. They burned a couple of points to change it. And gave up a shield point that they had there. This is points that they don't have a lot of use for anyway, so I guess it's okay. But basically what I'm looking at is they fired their wad, all the fighters are ready to start unloading, and we can start taking some real ships down, and maybe we'll see the price for engaging against a couple of carriers. So far is now a downed shield and a battle cruiser with 1 hit against it. And another fighter squadron coming in blew up the battle cruiser. Now that was at a cost, though. 2 squadrons were adjacent, so 2 fighters go down from that. And you know, this game is so deadly that attritional strategies like that kind of work. It's not like they don't happen in a game like SFB, but you're flying towards them and you're like, well, I'm sending a whole bunch of fighters in, but you would never blow up an enemy ship next to your fighters because the amount of damage, you know, it could wipe out your whole fighter squadron. So you try very hard not to cause that to happen. Of course, you have to declare all your fire at once in SFB, so you may not know. Here, I looked and I could tell I'm blowing it up, but screw it. You know? Actually, I didn't check for that. I probably should have fired 1 weapon at a time and tried to prevent it from actually exploding because of the cost. But screw it. Seemed to make all my mistakes on the Terrans. And now the destroyer has moved forward, thrown a couple of missiles out. I've got a change in place, which means those missiles are going to hit because they're targeted on this squadron, and that's going to take the entire squadron down. Turn movement, we come to one of those points. This is the move I wanted to make. He defended. That's not going to make a damn bit of difference because I'm not trying to take it from him. I needed to charge up a weapon over here, and then this guy threw a shield in place. But right now I've got a firing opportunity on a weakened shield with 3 phasers. And, you know, there's a fair chance I'll probably do 4 or 5 points of damage. That will take down that shield. Great. I could fire now, or I could wait. What matters, what happens if I wait? Well, if I wait, next round, nothing happens. The Talon could move forward a space. if he wants to use his afterburners. I don't see much value to that. And then the turn after, the impulse after that, everything goes, and I could conceivably gain initiative between those. I have no batteries, so I have none of that kind of special trickiness with these Fed ships. Their carriers don't carry batteries, unfortunately. Which means I am not going to have initiative. So the Talon gets to move first. He could turn, he could reinforce his shield. He could be in a better position. In particular, he could be in this hex. And then I might not get a shot off against him, but I could get a shot against something else. I think I'm going to take the shot just because I can, cycle more fighters in and really concentrate on one ship at a time. That makes it easier for the Talon to disengage, but wiping out these big ships seems more valuable to me than anything else. Based on the counters totally screwed me up. I thought I had a full spider squadron there. I do not. I only fired the one, and I definitely do want to fire it if it's just one. I fired off 3, got 6 hits. I'm like, that was pretty good. No. Very difficult for me to assess the information on the counters because marked up means good for weapons, bad for hits. So like, you look at a ship and you see a lot of black on it, you don't know whether that's a shot up ship or one that's armed. And I mean, yes, you can take a moment and look, but in the case of fighters, hey, it looked like, hey, they're all charged up. I see a lot of black on there. I forgot that I had killed some of this. I'm really not sure about these. I think all of these are actually gone. Again, the information tracking in this game, maybe I can get used to it. I'm getting used to certain aspects of it, but it definitely is causing me more problems than something that I'm incredibly familiar with dealing with, right? But by putting it on the impulse by impulse level, by having a lot of stuff I have to check on each of these pulses, I'm creating for my, the game creates for me a more difficult mental mechanical type state where I have to do there's a lot of little tasks I have to keep track of to handle that. Now, I like the payoff, which is that things last an entire turn, in some cases. There's a lot of design elements of this game that I think work very well. I do think overall it probably is more burdensome and more taxing on a per ship basis than playing out a turn of SFB. Programming the SSD, that's a special case. That doesn't take a lot of thought, like I've said. That's sort of a mechanical task, but it is expensive, and there's no question about that. If you're doing 11 ships on the side, as you engage into the battle and you start counting what damage there is and everything, it can take a good hour, to plot out your SSDs, possibly. I count on about an hour a turn once the battle gets engaged with full ship battles. With this, each impulse, which is, each of these turns takes about 20 minutes or so. So there's definitely a big reduction. There are less ships on the board, though. I don't know if I could handle 11 ships on a side in this thing. I think my brain would explode because the way the information is being transmitted is just so much more complicated. What I find in SFB is if I'm playing with less ships, there is some payoff, but it's not that big because in a lot of cases, filling out the energy allocation, not the SSDs, filling out the energy allocation is it's not just almost a mechanical task, but you think for one ship of the class, and then you copy that for all other ships of the class, and it's just very, very fast. The thinking on the energy allocation equivalent here, the power phase, that it definitely is faster. I was complaining about the thaw for it. Well, I can kind of get around that. As ships begin to segment and you have to make different decisions for each ship, that's going to get harder, but it gets harder in SFB too as differences occur. And here, because ships kind of go from healthy to dead very fast, they do in SFB too in the big fleet battles because you target all your weapons on one ship. Boom, it's, if not dead, it's dead in the water essentially. So there is a similar kind of mechanism in play. It's just you have more capability to target all at one ship from a distance and take them out. And then as things close, things get kind of chaotic there too. But here I feel like all that information on the board and on the counters is, I felt like the last battle was taxing me to the limit. This one, not so much, but I'm not sure why. Maybe I'm getting more comfortable. We fired pretty much everything we could at this battleship. What, another 4 phasers here, another one here, 5 phasers. And that got it a critical that did nothing. But we are reducing its power output, and it's in much weaker shape. It's still a potent ship. However, it may not want to be in the fight anymore. Because with that down shield, I could, first of all, I have my big gun, which I would like to get into play, and that would involve turning this way, which exposes my shield more. Might make more sense to just try to slowly curve around, save that ship. See, I defended, since I have more ships, I'm able to defend my initiative, which I think is kind of valuable. It's sometimes hard to tell what it's going to matter, but to me it seems like first shot of the new round is especially an important thing to try to defend. So rather than throw some extra shield reinforcement, I did that. We got one more fighter left loaded up, which kind of heading towards this destroyer. It may not end up going that way, but I definitely don't have enough firepower to do anything about any of the big ships right now unless I can get a shot in on that, which I might be able to. But I could just curve in and do that. If I can't do that, the next best thing, taking out those missiles before they recharge seems like a good idea. And destroyer doesn't take a whole lot to take down. I got enough firepower to hit it, and this one's actually damaged. This is the situation at the end of turn phase A. Nobody played with initiative, and this is kind of weird because the Terrans essentially had an opportunity here. There was only 1 point of power that Talon had, and they decided, well, if the Terrans want initiative, they can just take it, so no reason to defend, right? It's kind of a weird situation. But I also find it very, very hard to grab initiative when I can power weapons instead. We did the Talon did a afterburner to try to get their shield, their down shield out of the way. I don't want to lose this battleship. I would rather, have it out of play for 1 turn and repair it than lose the whole ship. And it's in some danger. So it may try to limp away. Again, I may try to get some weapons bearing, but we'll see. But the fighter did do quite a bit of damage to the destroyer. The squadron fired off its load. For the first time, I looked and said, well, I could conceivably kill it with 2 hits. So let's see what happens. Let's roll the attacks 1 at a time. Now the first hit could only have possibly taken down the shield, and it didn't. So I could have certainly rolled 2 shots at once. But the idea was maybe the critical will cause an issue. It kind of did. It took a power away, but that's not that big a deal. And the biggie was I didn't want to grab initiative because I charged up phasers on a couple of different weapons because I want to get my shots in, Initiative might be valuable though, so there's always this when you have that extra power, this really painful decision: do you charge an extra weapon or do you grab the initiative? Especially when it's just for 1 point like that. All these fighters are pushing by. There was some fire, took out one more squadron. In fact, the armed one, not a whole squadron, 1 more fighter, the armed one. I think we're allowed to target specific fighters within a group. But now they're coming around and they're getting behind the Talon ships, and this is where things start getting tricky, because this thing's not in good shape anymore. This thing's trying to slip away, although it has some weapons that bear in that direction. These guys don't have weapons that bear to their port side and rear. Nothing bears to the rear in this game. Nobody has defenses. So, I'm kind of getting into a good position. There is some danger of that guy getting shots off, but that's why he turned the way he did. It seemed the wisest of the moves. Again, no attempt to grab initiative. Initiative's becoming less important except for one thing. This carrier's got a couple of weapons armed on it. It may be destroyed before it gets its shot. It was able to line up a shot with its fusion guns, and I'm sorry, this one. And it took out the carrier. This one's still coming in. If it can get within range 2, it probably can take out the other carrier. And then things become a lot easier. You know, I try to attrition the fighters as best as I can and get ships, try to keep ships from getting destroyed. But you know, I've paid something of a cost already with a battle cruiser. If another one of these big capital ships goes down, I'd call this a success for the Terrans for sticking around. And the carrier trying to hide behind the terrain now. Slipped in here, made the same mistake. Didn't notice this fighter. I put an X on it. It helps me a little bit, so I had to re-roll. But did some damage. The rear shield on the battleship, I'm not sure I would have fired if I had realized I only had 2 fighters, but whatever. You know, I had already started marking it off, and I'm like, fine. So yeah, I've got 2 loaded fighters here that next impulse, they are not going to be able to fire and move. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm probably going to be able to get a shot in on a rear shield. Here I could have taken it on this thing. You know what? That's probably the best shot I'm going to get anyway. I might as well unleash with those as well. The thing is, it's hard to get around on the back again, but I've got another squadron coming up with, you know, probably can get some more fire there, although with him hiding in the terrain, I'm not going to be able to charge those weapons up as easily. Not a good roll. That's just 2 hits. Because of the ranges in this game, the weapons are all fairly close range. There isn't anything that, you know, you're blasting across the map. One of my SFB strategies just doesn't work. In general, with fleet battles in SFB, I stand off and try to pick off an enemy ship a turn. It depends on the race, obviously. Some races, you can't do that with, obviously, the Hydrons, most notably. And they're kind of my favorite race. But in general, you know, with my Feds, with my Klingons, it doesn't really make a difference. You can't come in and use your outmaneuverability in SFB in big fleet battles. It's great in like 1-on-1, even just like 3-on-3 or something like that. But once you start getting to big fleet battles, the goal becomes get to a reasonable range and trade shots, you know. Yeah, eventually you mess it up and get in close, but in this, you have to get close enough that firing arcs, maneuverability, and everything make a lot more difference. It feels a lot more like a dogfighting game, even, you know, with the big ships, than, and certainly the fighters more, SFB fighters are just a stack of damage coming at you, basically, that you can try to limit. They're very much like drones, except they can hang around and do other stuff. They can do utility stuff like pick off drones and things like that. Okay, Phase E, Impulse E is not a particularly, I think this is gone, and I know this is gone, I did not use that. It's hard to keep that mechanical stuff going. It's not a, it's one where nobody has any actions, but there's still potentials. At least for the Talon, they can fire their afterburners and try to get a shot in that way. It's pretty iffy on getting that second ship. Maybe this thing if I can outmaneuver it. So I did a kind of tricky maneuver with the Talon. This turned and moved up into here. That meant this had to accelerate its turn, burning its action point. That meant it didn't have a weapon charged, but the biggie was I was able to take that carrier out with a combination of disruptors and the fusion cannon. I think the fusion cannon alone could have done it on a good roll. It didn't get it, so I threw the disruptors in too, just to make sure, because I don't want that carrier power being loaned out. That's too potent. Right now, there's going to be one firing opportunity in total for next turn from the Terrans, which means I should be able to pretty much clean them up, I think, without much concern. They're not going to get a shot that's capable of doing any damage. If they could get in on this shield, they would. This thing here, yeah, the squadron took a plink at it, and the best it could have done was knock down a shield, but that would have been kind of impressive because then both side shields would be down, and that thing would be fairly vulnerable. It's pretty easy to line up shots on the side shields. It's harder to line them up on the front and rear. It's still not trivial, especially without the capability to ever side slip again. Time to plot my power. I'm assuming the fighters will keep their 0.5. I don't see any reason that they want more speed for less maneuverability at this point. But what the Talon cannon should do is a little iffy. During power allocation, I notice a problem with this destroyer. It's going speed 130, which is great, but I'm down a power, so that gets me to 0. I'm down another power, that would get me to -1, so I gotta fix that. I actually thought I was down 2 power initially, so if I go to 220, that'll get me down to 120, and then I can absorb that -1, so I don't explode. If I don't do that change, I explode. Other ships, you can see he's still going at his speed. He slowed down a little bit. Did he? No, he sped up a little bit. But the others are staying at the same speed. Concerned seeing this, I'm not really sure I moved my fighters. I think I did. I seem to remember doing so. I stepped away to load up a pipe and do some crap with my laundry, which I'm doing in my bathtub. Hey, this is all this stuff you don't need to know in the middle of a gaming description, but I do my wow, eagle. My things that need to be dry cleaned and such that I wash them with water in the bathtub. I found that works pretty well. It's kind of a weird thing, first time I tried it, I was like, I'm never going to spend for dry cleaning. Let me see how suits hold up to being washed by hand, and they actually hold up pretty well. The only problems I've had with my suits is with like the cuffs in the bottom and stuff like that. Nothing seems to lose shape terribly much from being exposed to water, but the cuffs and such not start falling apart at the bottom, so I have to often rehem the pants legs. That's and repair pockets when they rip. But for things that I spend less than dry cleaning costs on when I buy them at Goodwill or whatever, it's very, very nice to be able to just wash them rather than deal with the dry cleaning. First impulse, we get to see what's happening. The biggie is this destroyer burned an afterburner, launched some missiles at Diamondback here. They're pretty much doomed. They can try to outrun them, and maybe I can shoot them with something else, but honestly, I feel like my best option is to try to get into a position where I can fire next turn. The problem is, this ship has its disruptors facing the fighters, so they had to kind of turn away and run away from that because those disruptors all lighted up. This one, for some reason, does not have its disruptors charged. I remember to charge this weapon. I don't know what I did there. I think I probably put 2 in the yellow and not 1 in the red, so that actually was a fuck up. Let me see if I can fix that. And this guy here, he's able to turn, and he's got a load of disruptors which should be able to take that out pretty easily. The problem is, it's range 1, disruptors don't work well at range 1. So I kind of have to let that thing speed out in front of me a little bit so I get a good shot at it. But I think I'm pretty much cleaning up the fighters. Without another loss, there might be a chance to shoot at this destroyer. There's one armed weapon up here, and it's not really bearing on anything useful in the near future. Impulse C. Talon trying to maneuver around this guy. He's heading into the cloud. He had to turn. The fighters have swept in close here to give them some chance of surviving. Unfortunately, what I'd really like to do is line up a shot, but I can't get one in on that thing. If I could get I only have one phaser, but if I could have gotten, say, 2 in there, I could conceivably even blow this thing up. But I don't know how much value there is to anything I can do here, but maybe I get a critical that blows the ship up or something, you know? If I'm going through a down shield, that's possible. It's highly unlikely. Secondary explosion could do it. And core breach, so 2 or 12, so 1 and 18. Geometry of the fast flying fighters is totally flummoxing me again. But a combination of the side fire here, forward firing here. I took out another one of the fighter squadrons. There's 2 more fighters left here. I've got disruptors about ready to come online. Not next time, but on the final impulse, which is before this gets to move. Unfortunately, again, I did not have to turn to do that, so that I can turn and get a good shot in on that. So I'm almost assured a kill on those. Getting rid of this might be a little bit more difficult, but it doesn't look... It looks like it's a foregone conclusion. It's just a matter of whether I want to play it out. The chance of getting a shot, though, is so hard to ignore and just say, yeah, I'll surrender, you know? These missiles, I don't know what they're going to do, you know? I mean, they're just not that much faster. They'll gain some ground, but I'm going to take the shot if I can get it. The shot was successful. Now, there's something interesting. That wiped out these missiles' target. They don't disappear, though. It's not like SFB where they're locked to a target. They are, and they'll just keep flying this way now, because they're like, I don't know what to do. But the destroyer, if it gets a point of power, can redirect for each point of power, can redirect a missile to go chase after the existing squadron. That may not be the best use of power. Like reinforcing the shield might be a good move, because one more hit and I'm dead. And a phaser could conceivably only do 1 hit. If it does 2, I'm doomed anyway. Probably should have burnt my afterburners back here in E, but I'm not going to go back and do that. Now it's time to figure out my plots and see if I can save this guy, because he's in a lot of danger from that fighter. I got my FTL up to speed. I'm going to call it here and say this fighter's destroyed as well. It could play it out, but I don't see a point to it. Yeah, we were at phase 4. This thing only has, I think, 3 hull boxes to begin with, 3 or 4. Which, does it say? I don't know. Oh, crap. I can't tell. I think it's 4. But yeah, it was able to get out of there. It didn't have its FTL damaged. I just can't see how the fighter's going to survive. So we'll take a look at the points, but I basically traded a battlecruiser for 2 full carrier groups. Well, carriers, not groups. And we got some damage on a battleship, which means it's going to get pulled out of the battle, as is that destroyer. Doesn't look like it was a good battle for the Terrans at all, but we'll count the points and see what it turns out as. There's 500 points of production gone from the Terrans, and the Talon lost a battlecruiser, which is significantly less than that, 142. So, Cloud 9 is going to be back here, and that starts changing the game a little bit. And that is the end of the Battle of Cloud 9. We'll go see if the Orion sector, I don't think the Terrans are going for that base, so they're pressed pretty hard if that's the case. A couple in the middle, one up against a base here, one up against a base there. However, this is clearly the battle, and what that means is the Terrans have to commit to it pretty heavily. Talon can say, screw that, we're going to open up another, we're going to open up another sector going into there, and that is pretty damn promising to me, at least for next turn. I think this is probably going to be over fairly soon. Maybe not in the next full, campaign turn or whatever, but fairly soon. All right, let's send this up. Let's not. Orion, I have a scout, it looks like, and a light cruiser facing a base with 2 battle cruisers, a heavy cruiser destroyer, a frigate, and 2 transports. Yeah, we are not going to fight that. So that slides back to here, and that is basically the end of the campaign turn. And got a little bit of time, so I'm going to actually do the calculations and disposition the new fleets for turn 3. The calculations for what your between campaign turns, what you can do within them. For this scenario, not for the SE4X, which has different issues, but it feels like it gives a lot of detail for what it presents. I feel like the abstraction of being able, to move around on the board onto here, the decisions that were made for that are exceedingly painful. So for one thing, I have to make sure that I don't have more than 5 of any type of ship until I get 2 of every ship. Which means my builds, I can build 1 more battle cruiser. I built a dreadnought to get that up to 2, and a heavy cruiser to get that up to 2. I'm just short of frigate, and then I can build 5 more battle cruisers and 5 more destroyers. And I like those because they're good at wiping out fighters, and I think the missiles are pretty good on their own. The only problem is they have a slow recharge rate. They're fixed at that, at their recharge rate. And for the battle cruisers, it's 3, but they give you that good initial strike that can really kind of tie down the enemy's firepower or else take out their ships. That left me with 39 points left, just a little short of a frigate. That's okay. I am fine, with the excess points. But now, what I have to do is I transfer all my damaged ships back to the reserve, and now I have to count the total points in ships that I have allocated not to the reserve, and I shifted 2 transports. I'm going to be making my attack in the Antares sector against Rigel here. I need my transports because it's a planet. I want to take the base out. This might be difficult. We saw how hard a base was before. The question is, I did this with an odd even, which one I'm going to go for. And I'm going to do the same with the Terrans. So they could end up actually defending this more heavily. They're going to try to defend both, whereas the Talon are not really going to launch a real attack against Earth. Home. So they kind of get a bonus out of that because they know whichever one they're going for, they don't have to commit to the other one. The problem is they have a lot of forces on this sector, so some of those forces are going to be shifted, so that they have a lighter force facing Terra itself. What I was trying to express is now I have to count up all the TL points or LP points for the ships, which are not actually here, or are they? They're not the explosion value. I've got to look at those and then proportion based on the total that I've got committed. Oh, here it is. Based on the total I've got committed to each sector. So not only do I have the movement ratio commitments, but I also have to actually commit some forces. Now, if you didn't do this and we're playing on the map, it would be bloody obvious that there'd be, not a lot of forces in one sector, so the enemy could send just a few more into that sector, whatever. You'd have that all played out, kind of at a strategic level instead of this guesswork game. This is to prevent it from being a pure guessing game, but mechanically it's kind of painful to cope with. I have to go through a lot of steps to set it up. It's still going to be a hell of a lot faster than playing out SE4X, which will create a lot of light battles that don't really matter, you know. So here you're directed. There's 4 battles in 4 sectors that there might be battles in, and that's all you have. You don't have all the little skirmishes and stuff like that going on. For good or ill, you know, I totally think that I would enjoy playing this out on the playing the SE4X growth of the campaign out probably better than I do this. But this gets me a quick and dirty chance to play a number of scenarios without having to go through the whole SE4X. Now, I've got some expansions for SE4X that I want to get played, but those don't integrate well with this. So, you know, it's kind of like, we'll see. The Talon expansion is just continuing along in the same, the current one that's out is continuing along in the same fashion as this one. And I'm not really sure this is what I want for SE4X. I want something that captures that whole game, you know, as it stands as a campaign on the tactical level, so that I can play the tactical battles that the game generates organically and not the Talon versus Terran battle, which I kind of like the idea of the 4-sided battle, you know, of multiple factions being in the battle at once, whatever. It's the need to babble more. So one of the things that I always kind of like, SE4X is not Fed and Imp. You know, Fed and Imp provided, for the SFB universe, provided you with sort of a framework, and you could change that and play more of an Empires and Arms type game in it, not play the general galactic war, but play something similar to it with diplomacy and everything in it. Add some systems to it. I don't know if later editions allowed for any of that, where players could change side, and you're actually playing the field battles out, or the tactical battles out, that arise from alliances that didn't happen historically in the general war, and that's very appealing to me too. I've never actually done that. I never made the diplomacy system I would have liked for that game to handle that. But, you know, with SE4X, you have very, very generic things. You have, you know, hey, do I have fighter technology? Do I have this? You don't have all these different weapons types and everything. Now, this game sort of kind of tries to distinguish between weapons types, but it only gives you 2 races for obvious reasons. It's hard to balance something and everything. I'm not sure how balanced SFB ever was. You know, the ship point values were wrong, appeared to be incorrect early on. Now, as the game continued to develop over the years, one would assume that things got better, but my own experience was, yeah, those might have been reasonable for like small scenarios, but larger scenarios, I saw certain weapon systems just had the advantage over others. And some, like the Lyrans and the ISC, had ships that were way overpriced for what they could actually do in fleet battles. The ISC of all were the most disturbing. They were just overpriced, period. Because maybe I just didn't know how to handle them. But they just really didn't work the way one would want them to, with rear-firing plasma torpedoes and all kind of weird garbage like that on them. Yeah, you know, when else am I going to get a chance to babble about SFB? I'm sorry for those of you who've never played it, because, but I don't have the game here, and if I did, and I may not, simply because of this. If I did, I could never play it the way I used to, just in terms of devoting huge amounts of effort to it. I don't have the gumption to play games that hard anymore and that heavily. I probably could find the time, but I don't know. There's the internet, man. That screwed my whole life up in terms of gaming. Within the limitations is a little painful. First of all, I was just 1 point over the limit. So I withdrew a frigate back into my reserve along with my damaged ships. So that I dropped down to that, so I only need 7 per area. And in Orion, I don't have a lot. I'm hoping I can slip in up against whatever, Orion itself there, with this. But basically, I'm shifting my forces upward. Maelstrom, I've got a battleship and a battlecruiser. That's the lightest I could get there, kind of, without pulling stuff out of here. Now that's 7 points, fine. I'm not going to actually fight it though, I don't think, unless he leaves it completely undefended, basically, because I don't think that can take out a base. Over in Badlands, I have a fairly heavy amount of ships. I pulled my light cruisers and a heavy cruiser from the reserve, the light cruisers from Antares, so that I can make the advance here to the base. I'm sorry. Again, complicating the Terran's choices, but also, you know, making sure I don't lose ground. But Antares is my big one, and I've got 3 battlecruisers, 3 destroyers. Remember, these are the things I like to wipe fighters out with, and 2 dreadnoughts, and I sent 2 transports in as well for the attack. And I think I've got countermix for all of that, which means, you know, I've got one hell of a big force going in there. We'll see what the Terrans decide to do in terms of defense. Things are kind of grim for the Terrans. First of all, I can't build any ships unless I replace the ships that I don't have any of. And I don't have any CAs and I don't have any scouts. So I had to build one of those each. I needed another fighter squadron because my bases that are potentially under attack, I only had 7 healthy fighter squadrons left. I did pull back my damaged destroyer and my 3 fighters that were damaged. Yes, I could deploy them, but they were pretty questionable, you know? And that's a good way to lose the attrition war, is to put your damaged stuff on the line. One neat thing is, I had so few points that I could commit because of that. That put me in the 19 range. I only need 3 LP per sector, and because there's one of these markers on there, and I'm actually under threat to the homeworld, it drops down to 2 LP per sector. So I don't actually have to put many ships anywhere. So I cover Badlands and Orion, each with a light cruiser. It's not optimal, but you see, I can push the Talon back in a couple of sectors if I win. Now, I made the decision that I don't think the Talon are going for my home, so I'm going to defend Antares pretty heavily. And what I put there was 2 battleships, the fighter squadron, and a couple of transports. And remember, I also have the base. That's a lot of firepower there. Proportionally, at least. But in the Maelstrom sector, I also went kind of heavy. I had to transfer from Orion, so I pulled a battle cruiser out of Orion, and that couldn't go anywhere other than Maelstrom. And then I'm like, a heavy cruiser helps that, and that left me with a scout. I figure the scout's not going to help much in Antares. It might help here. And I put 2 transports in each because there are planets in each. As long as I can prevent the planet from falling, even if I lose the battle, I'm in good shape. So, you know, I committed all my transports to defending these 2 planets. I hope there's a planet here. Otherwise, I screwed up. And it looks to me like we're ready to rock. I have like 23 points left. That's a good part to a fighter. You know, I feel like I'm going to have to spend a fair amount of points in rebuilding my fighters every turn, just because they're getting clobbered. And having those excess fighters that I built early on is turning out to be helpful. Although, you know, if I had dispositioned my troops better to begin with and didn't have so much unuseful points spent, the transports, the fighters, etc., I had a lot that wasn't able to be put on the line, more than the Talon did. And then, of course, I made what appeared to be tactical blunders where I lost battles that maybe I should have won or didn't do as well as I should have in them. It's hard to tell. That last battle, for example, you know, I think I went into with an over-optimistic expectation over Cloud 9 in terms of being able to stop the Talon with the 2 carriers. Those heavy ships have a lot of disruptors on them and can really do a lot of damage. I think it's pretty much over for the Terrans, but I don't think it's going to be over right away. You know, I think they're going to be able to defend their bases, but they're going to lose ground elsewhere. We'll see how it all turns out. Let's send this up.